Something unique about it. Trials trigger a muzzle or a megaphone of worship. The hardships in life, the trials we experience, they're very unique. They trigger unique things in our life. And the reason I say that is because depending on who you're preoccupied with, depending on what you're preoccupied with, you could be worshiping you. You're preoccupied with you. You worship your life, you worship your job, you worship the security that money brings you. You worship these things. And then when hardship and trial comes, because your worship is there, the worship of God is almost non-existent. That's when the score comes down. That's when the soundtrack becomes muffled and muzzled, like you just can't understand. Even when you try, you can't understand what somebody's saying or doing because they've had the wrong preoccupation. Worship's still happening, but the worship of God begins to fall. The worship of a life of faith, the soundtrack just starts to go down in trials. It's very unique. But at the same time, when we understand lifestyles of worship, we understand that it's an opportunity that even when things are bad, to continue to give God thanks, to give God worship, to have our preoccupation with Him. It has the opportunity to be a megaphone, to just absolutely amplify everything in our lives in terms of who it is that we love and who it is that we are focused on. So it's very unique. Trials, hardships have a very unique way of revealing who and what we're preoccupied with. And so there's a great example. Paul and Silas is a great example in this moment when they are entering into a town and they are... basically, he exorcises a demon from this lady. Now, the problem with that was that particular lady, she was in her possession. They were able to get predictions from her, so she was like a future teller, like a prediction, and they were making money off of her. So the moment Paul sort of frees her and releases her, everybody gets mad. They get really upset. And they start kind of casting lies, and they get the town people and the government officials kind of rallied around that they need to get rid of Paul and Silas because they've done this awful thing. They start making up stories about them. So let's pick up right here. This is kind of what happens. This is in Acts 16. It says this is Paul and Silas, were severely beaten. And they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was ordered, because they were told how dangerous these two men were, they were ordered to make sure that they didn't escape, right? So the jailer put them in the inner dungeon, which just, in your mind, picture the deepest, darkest hole. Okay, that's the best way to describe these dungeons. It's the deepest, darkest hole, and then clamp their feet in stocks. Very uncomfortable. And so for them, they've been falsely accused of some things. They did something that was supposed to be good, and they got this completely different response. And I love how it says around midnight. Now, I love around midnight because it's a big part of this verse, big part of this story is around midnight, something happens, there's a turning point. And around midnight's a tough one because we don't really understand sometimes around midnight what that means for us. But it's the midnight hour. It's the time where everything's quiet, when you're alone. When the rejection is at its highest, when the pain is at its highest, when the tragedy in you is at its highest. It's a simple illustration would be, it's that Facebook post that says worst period, day period, ever period, right? And then you get 18 people, your friends, and they kind of know your situation, praying for you. So sorry, sweetie, it's okay, And then you get another 20 people that have no idea, and they just want to quote verses over you and, try to speak some encouragement. And that's great. But the midnight hour, around midnight, is the next morning when you wake up and you check that feed again and there's no new posts. There's nothing new. Everybody's kind of trucked on with life. And you're still facing this tragedy. You're still facing this hardship. You're still facing this issue that you don't know what to do. But around midnight, this is where the story is. Around midnight, this turning point. It says around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. And the other prisoners were listening. So even in this turning point, because of Paul and Silas having this understanding that life is worship, that it's going to be a muzzle or a megaphone, something's going to happen in order for us to show our gratitude back to God, they decided for it to be a megaphone moment. And the other prisoners were listening.